The afternoon sun washed over the small rural school, painting the old wooden floors in stripes of warm light. In classroom 3B, the quiet hum of a projector was the only sound competing with the distant shouts from the soccer field. Mr. Kim Jae-won stood before his 23 students, a well-worn history book open but unread on his desk. "So," he said, his voice calm and clear, "we move from facts and dates to the stories we tell about ourselves. Today, the story of Dan-gun." A few students in the back, including Min-soo, the tall boy with the football jersey, tried to hide yawns. Near the window, Yuna fiddled with a small, broken calculator under her desk, her fingers tracing its circuits. Hannah, sitting quietly in the front, simply looked out at the sky, her mind elsewhere. Jae-won saw this. He was used to it. He had left a comfortable office job in Seoul to come back here, to this town where the mountains met the fields. He wanted to teach more than just information. He wanted to teach connection. Dan-gun, he continued, walking down the aisle between desks. The grandson of heaven, they say. He founded the first Korean kingdom thousands of years ago. But the important part isn't if a bear really became a woman. The important part is the why of the story. What does it tell us about the people who kept telling it, generation after generation? He paused by Min-soo's desk. The boy straightened up, pretending to be interested. "It tells us they valued patience," Min-soo offered, guessing. "Good," Jae-won nodded. "The bear had to wait 100 days in a cave, eating only garlic and mugwort, to become human. Patience. What else?" From the middle of the room, Yuna spoke without looking up from her calculator. "Transformation. The will to become something more." "Exactly." Jae-won gave her a small smile. He knew she was brilliant, her mind always solving puzzles he couldn't see. "And Hannah?" he asked gently. Hannah turned her gaze from the window. Her eyes were thoughtful. "It's about a beginning, point where everything starts. It gives roots." "Roots," Jae-won repeated, his voice softening. "Identity. In a world full of change, these stories are anchors. They tell us who we are and what we can endure. This myth isn't a fairy tale. It's an early lesson in survival." He was about to ask another question when the classroom lights flickered once, then died. The projectors fan word to a stop. A collective "oh" came from the students, mixed with a few giggles. Power outages happen sometimes out here, but this was different. The silence that followed was absolute. The usual background buzz of computers, the clock on the wall, the air conditioning. All of it just stopped. It was a thick, swallowing quiet. From the soccer field, the shouts had also ceased. Jae-won felt a cold trickle of unease. He moved to the window. "Sir, is it the power lines again?" Min-soo asked, already half out of his seat, hoping for an early dismissal. Jae-won didn't answer. He looked out. The sky was a clear, bright blue. But over the line of pine trees at the edge of the school property, he saw dark, triangular shapes. They were silent. They moved slowly, with a strange, fluid grace that no airplane or helicopter he had ever seen possessed. They blocked the sun in patches, casting fast, sharp shadows that slid over the grass. His stomach tightened. The news reports for the past 3 days had been confusing. Strange atmospheric phenomena. Unexplained communication blackouts in big cities. The government said it was a global technical fault. To be calm. But this, before he could form an order, a sound ripped through the silence. It was not an explosion, but a deep, resonant thump that vibrated in their chests. Came from the front of the school. Then came the screams. Not from outside, but from inside the main hallway. Short, sharp cries of surprise and fear, cut off too quickly. The classroom door suddenly seemed very thin. "Get away from the door," Jae-won said, his teacher's voice cutting through the panic that was starting to bubble up. "Get under your desks. Now, all of you." The students stared at him, frozen. He was not a man who shouted. His calm was usually unshakable. The fear in his eyes, carefully controlled but present, moved them more than a yell ever could. They scrambled, the desks scraping loudly on the floor. Yuna crouched beside Hannah, her calculator forgotten. Minsu peeked out from under his desk, his face pale. Jae-won stood between them and the door, his heart hammering against his ribs. He thought of the drills they practiced. Fire drills. Earthquake drills. There was no drill for this. A new sound began. A series of precise, metallic clicks and a low hum, coming closer down the hallway. It was methodical. There was no rushing, no rough voices. Just the steady, approaching rhythm of something organized and alien. The door to classroom 3B did not burst open. There was no dramatic crash. The handle glowed red for a half-second. Then the entire lock mechanism fell to the floor with a quiet clink, vaporized from the inside. The door swung inward. Two figures stood in the hallway. They were tall, encased in smooth, gray armor that seemed to absorb the light. They had no visible seams, no eyes, just a dark visor across where a face should be. They carried devices that looked like sleek, black rifles but with no obvious trigger or barrel. One of them turned its head, the movement smooth and insect-like, scanning the room. A third figure stepped between them. Its armor had a subtle silver line across the chest. It held a small, flat device. A voice came from it, flat and robotic, without any emotion at all. This structure is under containment. You will be processed. Resistance is inefficient. You will stand and proceed to the central gathering area. Jae-won's mind raced. Processed. Gathered. The words were sterile, cold. He saw his students, wide-eyed and trembling under the cheap wooden desks. He saw the folk painting of a tiger hanging on the back wall, a symbol of Korean spirit. He saw the story of Dan Gun, of patience and transformation, evaporate in the face of this cold, silent reality. The commander, for that is what he assumed the silver-lined one was, pointed its device at him. You are the social node. You will ensure order. Failure will result in segment removal. Jae-won understood. They saw him as a tool for their efficiency. In that moment, his teacher's instinct overrode his terror. His job was still to protect, to instruct. Even now, especially now, he took a slow breath. He looked not at the aliens, but at his students. He made his voice as steady as he could. Everyone, he said, stand up, slowly. Do exactly as they say. He locked eyes with Yuna, with Minsu, with Hannah. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. It was not a nod of surrender. It was the start of a new lesson. The first one under a new, terrible syllabus. The lesson of survival had just begun. The aliens did not touch them. They did not shout. They simply pointed the way with the barrels of their strange weapons. Mr. Kim Jae-won kept his students together, a flock of frightened sheep with him as the reluctant shepherd. He walked at the front, his hands held carefully where the aliens could see them. Stay close, he murmured, not looking back. Do not look at them directly. Just walk. The hallway was a scene of silent ruin. Other classroom doors stood open. Their locks melted away. They passed the science lab. The glass front of a cabinet was shattered, not from violence, but from some precise, intense heat. A globe from the geography room lay in the corridor, cracked neatly in half. They saw other students and teachers. Mrs. Lee, the music teacher, was herding a group of sobbing first graders. Her face was white, but she was singing a soft, trembling song to them. An alien soldier stood behind her, its blank visor watching. It made no move to stop the singing. It simply observed. Jae-won filed this away. They allowed non-resistance. They were observing behavior. They were all funneled into the large gymnasium. The basketball hoops were folded up. The blue mats were stacked against the wall. The room was filled with a low, anxious hum, the sound of 300 people trying not to scream. More of the armored soldiers stood around the edges of the room. They were perfectly still. One of them stood by the main doors, which were now sealed shut by a sheet of glowing, blue energy that shimmered like hot air. At the center of the gym floor was a machine. It was a tall, thin pillar with a ring of pale green light that rotated slowly around its middle. A wide, shallow dish on the floor glowed with the same light. The robotic voice boomed from a soldier near the machine. You will form a single line. You will step into the scanning field one at a time. You will remain still. This is for cataloging. Compliance is efficient. A teacher from the senior school, Mr. Park, stepped forward, his face red with anger. You have no right. This is a school. We demand. He did not finish. The soldier nearest to him did not raise its weapon. A small, silver device on its wrist flashed. A pulse of sound, so high-pitched it was more a feeling of sharp pain in the teeth than a noise, hit Mr. Park. He crumpled to the floor, conscious but shaking, unable to stand. Resistance is inefficient, the voice repeated, flat as stone. You will be processed. Two soldiers stepped forward. They did not drag Mr. Park. They each took an arm and lifted him with effortless, mechanical strength. They carried him not to the machine, but to a side door of the gymnasium. They took him through it. The door closed behind them. He was gone. A terrible silence fell over the gym. The message was clear. Resistance meant removal. The line began to form. One by one, students and teachers stepped into the circle of green light. The ring would pass over them from head to toe. It made a soft, buzzing sound. A series of symbols, sharp and angular, flashed in the air above the machine for a second before fading. Then the person was directed to the far side of the gym to sit on the floor. J1 watched everything. His historian's mind was working desperately, trying to understand. Cataloging. They were not killing. They were sorting, like librarians with new books. He saw Minsu tense up as his turn approached. The boy's fists were clenched, his body coiled like a spring. He was looking at the soldier who had stunned Mr. Park, his eyes burning. J1 acted without thinking. He stepped slightly out of line and placed a firm hand on Minsu's shoulder. He leaned in as if to steady the boy. Minsu, he whispered, his voice low and urgent. The tiger in the tail of Baekdu Mountain. What did it do? Minsu blinked, confused by the question at such a moment. What? The tiger. It waited. It watched. Picked its moment. It was patient. Then it was fierce. Be the tiger now. Be patient. He gave Minsu's shoulder a squeeze and stepped back into line. Minsu stared at him. The fight seemed to drain from his shoulders, replaced by a confused focus. He stepped into the light. The ring passed over him. He was cleared and sent to sit down. Yuna was next. She stepped into the field, but as the ring passed over her, she deliberately turned her head to look straight at the scanning pillar. She was observing it, even as it observed her. The soldier by the machine took a step forward, a warning. Yuna quickly looked down at her feet. She was processed. Hannah moved like a ghost through the light, her eyes taking in everything. The pattern of the symbols in the air, the number of soldiers, the way the light from the ceiling door reflected on the polished floor. Finally, it was J1's turn. The green light felt cold, tingled on his skin. He saw the symbols flash above him, a cluster of dots and lines that meant nothing to him. He was directed to the sitting area. He found his class huddled together. Their eyes were huge, fixed on him. He sat down slowly among them, creating a small circle of calm in the sea of fear. For hours, the cataloging continued. The aliens were methodical, relentless. They did not eat. They did not rest. They showed no emotion. As the last person was scanned, the commander, the one with the silver line, entered. It stood before the tired, terrified crowd. The translator device activated. Your societal divisions are irrelevant. Your former roles are terminated. You are now segments of the contained collective. This location is your assigned quadrant. You will receive nutritional paste and hydration. Order will be maintained by your designated social node. It turned its visor toward J1. A light on its wrist projected a small, hard beam onto J1's chest. You will ensure calm and order. You will prepare them for transport. Efficiency serves all. J1 felt every pair of eyes in the room land on him. Some were pleading. Some were accusing. Some were just lost. The commander turned and left. The soldiers by the doors remained. The energy barrier hummed. They were trapped. J1 looked at the faces of his students. Yuna's sharp intelligence, Minsu's smoldering strength, Hannah's quiet notice. He thought of the removed teacher, Mr. Park. He thought of the cataloging machine. They were being filed away, their humanity reduced to flashing symbols. The aliens had given him a role, the keeper of order, the pacifier. He knew what he had to do. He had to play the part. But the lesson he would teach under this new title would not be about order. It would be about something the cold, efficient visitors could never catalog, could never understand. He would have to teach them how to remain human, and that, he realized, might be the only weapon they had left. The aliens gave them gray blankets and containers of a thick, tasteless paste for food. They gave them water. They did not speak to them again. The energy barrier over the gym doors stayed on, a constant, soft buzz that filled the silence. The soldiers stood by it, unmoving statues. Mr. Kim Jae-won watched his students pick at the paste. Min-soo pushed his away in disgust. Yuna examined hers, smelling it. Hannah just held hers, not eating. Jae-won ate his portion slowly. He needed the strength. He was thinking of stories. Not the old myths now, but real histories. He thought of the teachers long ago in places taken over by force. In wars and camps and ghettos, those teachers had no weapons. They had only knowledge. And they used it. They taught children in secret not just math and reading, but how to remember who they were. They taught songs, poems, languages that were forbidden. They kept a flame alive in the dark. He looked at the alien soldiers. They were so sure. They had dissolved human society with a word. They thought a teacher was just a social node, a tool for their order. He would have to be a different kind of tool. The next morning, the same robotic voice echoed in the gym. The social node. You will return to your instruction space with your assigned segment. You will demonstrate routine. They were letting him go back to his classroom. Under guard, of course. It was a test. They wanted to see if their control system worked. Jae-won stood up. He looked at his class. You heard them. Everyone up. Line up by the door. His voice was the same calm, firm teacher's voice he had always used, but his eyes sent a different message. He gave a small, slow nod. Follow my lead. They walked back through the quiet halls to classroom 3B. 2 soldiers followed them inside and took positions by the open doorway. They would watch. The room was as they had left it. Desks were still pushed crookedly from when they had hidden under them. The folk painting of the tiger still hung on the wall. Sunlight still came through the windows. It felt like a museum of a lost world. Sit at your desks, Jae-won said. We will continue our lessons. The students obeyed, moving slowly. They looked at him, confused. How could they have a lesson now? Jae-won walked to the front. He did not open his history book. He looked out at the young faces, pale with fear and lack of sleep. He glanced at the soldiers by the door. Their dark visors were pointed at him. Listening, watching. He began to speak. His voice was clear, meant to be heard by the guards. Yesterday we discussed the founding myth of Dangun. Today we will discuss a more modern example of social cohesion. We will discuss the subway system of Seoul. He saw Yuna's eyebrows go up. Min-soo looked utterly lost. Hannah just watched, very still. The Seoul subway, Jae-won continued, walking down the aisle. It is one of the busiest in the world. Millions of people use it every day. How does it function without constant disorder? He paused by Min-soo's desk. Min-soo, how do people know where to go? Min-soo stared. The maps. The maps, Jae-won said, as if it was a brilliant answer. Color-coded lines. A system. But what if the power fails? What if the maps are gone? He turned to Yuna. Yuna, what then? Yuna understood. She saw the game. They use backup systems, she said, her voice careful. Battery lights. They have emergency protocols. They follow the person who knows the way out. Exactly, Jae-won said. He was not just teaching them. He was performing for the aliens. A lesson about order and systems. They remain calm. They follow a known protocol. They look for the signs others might miss. He stopped by Hannah's desk. Hannah, You are good at noticing details. What might be a sign others miss? Hannah's eyes flickered to the window, then to the soldiers, then back to J1. A small exit sign, a different airflow, a pattern in the noise. Patterns, J1 echoed, nodding seriously. Excellent. In any system, even a failed one, patterns remain. Our job is to see them, to understand the system we are in. He said this while looking straight at the alien soldiers. He spent the hour this way, talking about traffic flow, about library organization, about how a community shares water from a well. On the surface, it was a dull lesson about human infrastructure. But underneath, he was giving his first real instructions. Look for the maps. Find the backup systems. Learn the patterns. Follow the one who knows the way. When the lesson time was over, the soldiers motioned for them to return to the gym. As they lined up, J1 spoke quietly, his back to the guards. Tonight, in the gym, I want you to think. Think about power. What small batteries are in the gym? The clock? The fire alarm? Anything. Minsu, think about structure. Which walls are not solid? Which vents are large? Hannah, watch the soldiers. How many? When do they change? What do they never look at? They walked back in silence. The soldiers led them to their same spot on the gym floor. The energy barrier hummed. That night, under the dim emergency lights the aliens allowed, Yuna leaned close to J1. Her voice was a whisper. The fire alarm panel. It has a small battery light. It's green. Minsu whispered from his other side. The door to the equipment room. In the corner. It's just wood. Not like the metal doors. Hannah's whisper was the softest. There are always 4 guards. They change when the light from the high window hits the floor in a certain way. They never look up at the ceiling beams. J1 listened. He felt a small, hard spark ignite in his chest. It was not hope. It was purpose. The aliens had returned him to his classroom to show him he was now their instrument of control. But in that room, surrounded by the symbols of his real purpose, the books, the tiger painting, his students, he had remembered what he was. He was not a social node. He was a teacher. And his new students needed a very specific curriculum. One the aliens would never approve. They were watching for rebellion, for shouts and fights. They were not watching for quiet observation. They were not watching for a lesson hidden inside another lesson. He looked at the dark visors of the guards by the humming door. You can take our world, he thought, but you cannot understand it. And that will be your mistake. The first covert class had been a success. The real learning had begun. Days passed in a strange, gray routine. The pace for meals. The trips to the classroom under guard. The long hours in the silent gym. Mr. Kim J1's public lessons continued to be boring lectures on human systems. But the real lessons happened in whispers on the gym floor after dark. It was not about building weapons. It was about building a mind. A shared mind that could see what the aliens could not. In the classroom one afternoon, under the watchful gaze of the soldiers, J1 taught a chemistry lesson. On the chalkboard, he drew the simple formula for water. H2O. The most vital substance, he said, his voice flat like the alien translator. Without it, life ceases. In a crisis, finding it is the first priority. He looked at Yuna. Yuna. Name common sources of water in a building. Yuna knew her part. Pipes. Toilet tanks. Heating systems. Good, J1 said. He then added another formula below it. NH3. Ammonia. A cleaning agent. Very useful. Also, a strong irritant to the eyes and lungs. He paused, letting that hang in the air. He erased the board slowly. Different substances for different purposes. It is important to know what is in your environment. The soldier by the door shifted its weight slightly. The lesson was dull. It was about resources. It was acceptable. Later, in the gym, Yuna's whisper was excited. The janitor's closet. Next to the equipment room Minsu found. The door is loose. I saw cleaning bottles inside. Some have that symbol. J1 nodded. Not a weapon. A distraction. Remember that. Another day, the history lesson was about the Gwangju Uprising. On the surface, he called it a study of civic response to system failure. Communication was cut, Jae-won told the class, his hands behind his back. The official news was false. So, the people found other ways. They used homemade radios. They drove cars with loudspeakers through the streets. They told their own story. They became their own broadcast. He looked at each of them. When the main system is controlled, you must create a secondary one. Even a simple one. That night, Min-soo whispered, "The old scoreboard. In the equipment room. It has wires. And big, old batteries." Yuna's eyes lit up in the dark. "I could do something with that. Maybe not a radio, but a signal. A light, or a sound." "Too loud," Hannah whispered. "Sound brings them. Light is better. A pattern they won't understand." The classroom became their workshop of ideas. During a geography lesson on caves, Jae-won talked about natural formations that hide entire rivers. "What is visible on the surface is often only a small part of the story," he said. "The real movement is hidden underground." He was talking about their plans. The students knew it. They were learning to speak in a secret language made from school subjects. One evening, a problem arose. A boy from another class, Taeyong, had a bad cough. It was a dry, hacking sound that echoed in the quiet gym. One of the soldiers turned its head. The green light on its wrist glowed. The robotic voice spoke. "The malfunctioning segment will be removed for quarantine." Two soldiers began walking toward the coughing boy. Panic flared. The boy's friends tried to shield him, their faces terrified. This was not violent resistance, but it was obstruction. The soldier's wrist device began to pulse with a higher, warning light. Jae-won stood up quickly. He moved between the soldiers and the students. He held up his hands, facing his own people. "Stop!" he commanded, using his teacher's voice. It was sharp and left no argument. The students froze. He looked at the sick boy's friends. "You are not helping him. Let the process happen." His voice was hard, almost cruel. The students backed away, confused and hurt. The soldiers took the coughing boy by the arms and led him away. He was gone. The gym was filled with a bitter silence. Many students looked at Jae-won with anger. He was playing the aliens game. He was helping them. Jae-won felt their stares like physical blows. He returned to his spot and sat down, his face blank. Yuna, Min-soo, and Hannah looked at him, unsure. Later, when the lights were lowest, Yuna's angry whisper came. "Why? We could have stopped them. We could have all refused." Jae-won's whisper back was tired but firm. "And then all of you would have been zapped like Mr. Park. Or removed. We would have lost everyone. We lost one to keep the many. It is a terrible math. But it is the only math we have right now." He let that sink in. "They see us as a list of names. They will remove any name that causes a problem to keep the list neat. We cannot be a problem yet. We must be invisible until the right moment." He looked at Min-soo, whose fists were clenched. "The tiger is not invisible because it is weak. It is invisible because it is smart. It knows when to hide." The next day in the classroom, Jae-won did something different. He had the students push all the desks to the sides. He had them sit on the floor in a tight circle. The soldiers watched, curious. "Today," Jae-won said, sitting with them, "a lesson in nonverbal communication. Sometimes words are not safe. So you must speak with your eyes, with a touch, with a small sign." He showed them. A tap on the knee meant listen. A scratch on the elbow meant danger. Looking up at the ceiling meant look for an opportunity. He made it a game. He would give a signal and they had to guess the meaning. The students, especially the younger ones, almost smiled. Felt like play. The soldiers saw a group activity. A social exercise. It was efficient. It was orderly. But by the end of the hour, the class had a new, silent way to talk. A language under the language. Walking back to the gym, Min-soo brushed past Hannah. His fingers tapped her wrist twice. "Stay strong." Hannah, a moment later, caught Yuna's eye and glanced briefly at a ceiling vent. Possible exit. Yuna nodded, then touched her own ear and pointed subtly at a soldier. They are listening. No words were spoken. The soldiers saw nothing but a line of quiet students. J1 walked at the front, his heart heavy but sure. They were no longer just hiding. They were weaving a net right under the aliens' feet. A net made of looks, of whispers, of shared knowledge. They were learning to be a community again, in secret. And a community, he knew, was the one thing a list of names could never truly control. The pressure was a living thing in the gym. It was in the tightness of every shoulder, the quick dart of every eye. Minsu felt it most of all. The tall boy who used to run across a soccer field now spent his days sitting, standing, walking in silent lines. His body, made for action, was a coiled spring with no release. He watched the soldiers. Their perfect, silent control was like a constant insult. He remembered Mr. Park falling. He remembered the coughing boy being led away. The anger burned in his stomach, hot and sour. One afternoon, back in the classroom, the lesson was pointless again. J1 was talking about agricultural crop rotation. Minsu stopped listening. His eyes were fixed on the soldier by the door. The soldier's blank visor was pointed at the floor, as if they were so unimportant it didn't even need to watch them fully. They don't even see us, Minsu thought. The anger boiled over. He didn't plan it. It was a spark. As the lesson ended and they lined up, the soldier turned to lead the way. His back was to Minsu for just a second. The smooth, gray armor, the humming device on its wrist. Minsu moved. He took 2 quick steps, his body remembering the speed of a striker going for a goal. He wasn't thinking of a weapon. He just wanted to hit, to shatter the silence. He swung his fist, aiming for the spot where the neck would be. He never made contact. The soldier didn't even turn. The device on its wrist flashed blue. A wall of force, invisible and solid, slammed into Minsu. It threw him back across the classroom. He crashed into desks, the sound horribly loud in the quiet room, and landed in a heap, gasping for air. Chaos erupted. Students screamed. The other soldier by the door snapped its weapon up, a low hum charging the air. Mr. Kim J1 was already moving, but not toward Minsu. He stepped directly into the center of the room, between the fallen boy and the soldier whose wrist was now glowing a warning red. J1's face was not frightened. It was furious. A deep, cold fury the students had never seen. He pointed at Minsu, who was struggling to get up, winded and shocked. "You fool!" J1's voice cut through the panic like a whip. It was so loud, so sharp, it made everyone freeze. "You arrogant, thoughtless child." The soldiers paused. Their programming recognized a superior enforcing order. They watched. J1 advanced on Minsu, his eyes blazing. "You think with your muscles? You think you are a hero?" He was now standing over the boy, his back to the aliens. He was performing, but his anger was real. A teacher's terrifying anger at a student who had thrown away every lesson. "You know nothing," J1 thundered. "Let me tell you a story. The great Admiral Yi Sun-sin. He had 12 ships. The enemy had over 300. Did he charge in like a reckless bull? No. He used the geography. He used the narrow straits of Myeongyang. He used the tides. He made the enemy's numbers useless. He was patient. He was smart. He thought of his people." With each word, J1's hand chopped through the air. He was not just scolding Minsu. He was teaching everyone. He was giving them a new story to replace the impulse to fight. "You have the strength of a tiger, but the brain of a rabbit," J1 shouted. "A tiger knows when to strike. You have endangered everyone in this room for a moment of pride. You are a disgrace to the story." Minsu stared up at him, his face a mix of pain, shame, and dawning understanding. The other students were silent, gripped by the spectacle. J1 finally turned to the soldiers. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of submission. "This segment is defective. He was not following the order. I have corrected him. He will not do it again." His voice was calm now, the fury gone, replaced by the flat tone of a manager reporting a problem fixed. The lead soldier's red wrist light faded to green. It looked from J1 to the crumpled Minsu. It saw a dominant human suppressing a rebellious one. This was efficient. This was the social node functioning perfectly. It gave a single, sharp nod. The other soldier lowered its weapon. The defective segment will be disciplined, the robotic voice stated. Continue order. The soldiers gestured for the line to form. The lesson was over. The incident was closed. As they walked back to the gym, Minsu limped, his side aching. No one spoke to him. He felt alone and hollow. That night in the dark gym, Minsu lay on his blanket, facing away from the others. He felt a hand on his shoulder. It was J1. The teacher sat beside him, his anger gone, replaced by a deep tiredness. Does it hurt? J1 whispered. Yes. Minsu whispered back, his voice thick. Good. Remember the hurt. Let it teach you what the anger cannot. J1's voice was soft now. I was not calling you a fool. I was telling the aliens you were a fool. There is a difference. The story of Admiral E, it was not for shame. It was a gift. It is a map of how the weak can beat the strong. But you must be smart to read it. Minsu rolled over. In the dim light, he could see J1's face. I'm sorry. I know, J1 said. But sorry is not enough now. You must be better. Your strength is vital. But it must be aimed. Like Admiral Yi's ships in the narrow strait. Aimed, and at the perfect time. He squeezed Minsu's shoulder. You are not a disgrace. You are a student who failed a test. Now learn from it. Be the tiger, not the rabbit. Minsu nodded slowly. The hot, stupid anger was gone. In its place was a new feeling. It was colder, sharper. It was purpose. Across the gym, Yuna and Hannah had watched the whole thing. They saw the performance. They saw the real lesson hidden in the shouting. They saw J1 risk everything to turn Minsu's mistake into a new teaching. The aliens had seen a social node successfully suppressing disorder. What they had really seen was a teacher, in the most dangerous moment, giving his student the only thing that could truly save him, a better strategy. He had turned a story of ancient war into a lifeline. The pressure in the gym was still there, but in Minsu it had been transformed. It was no longer a spring about to snap. It was a blade being slowly, carefully sharpened. A change came. The soldiers stopped taking them to the classroom. The routine broke. Instead, the aliens brought the class to them. 2 soldiers entered the gym and motioned for J1 and his students to stand. They were led not to their familiar room, but to the school's small auditorium. The air felt different, charged. The auditorium was empty except for a group of 5 new aliens. Their armor was the same gray, but they had no weapons. They carried flat data slates and stood perfectly still. In front of them was the commander, the one with the silver line. The robotic voice spoke. The assimilation process proceeds. Your segment has been noted for its order. It will now serve as a demonstration of efficient control for the observers. J1 understood. They were a model class, a showpiece. The aliens were so confident in their victory, they were now giving tours of their own efficiency. His stomach tightened. The commander continued. The social node will conduct a final instructional session. You will demonstrate the prepared, compliant human mind. You will teach the lesson of acceptance. They wanted a performance of surrender. They wanted to see the human spirit broken and repackaged as obedience. The observers watched, their blank visors like dark mirrors. The usual soldiers stood by the doors, weapons ready. J1 students were herded onto the small stage. They stood in a nervous clump, blinking under the bright lights that had been turned on. They looked small and very young. J1 was handed a small device by the commander. It was a translator. Your words will be conveyed, the flat voice said. Begin. J1 walked to the center of the stage. He looked out. He saw the observers, cold and analytical. He saw his students, terrified. He saw Yuna, her hands clenched. Minsu, standing very straight, his eyes fixed ahead. Hannah, her gaze taking in everything. He thought of all the hidden lessons. The maps, the signals, the stories of tigers and admirals and secret broadcasts. He thought of the coughing boy and Mr. Park. He thought of the folk painting in his classroom, the vibrant blues and reds of dancing. The aliens expected a lesson on acceptance. He would give them a lesson, but not the one they wanted. He held the translator to his lips. His voice, amplified and flat, filled the silent room. The lesson today is on color. The observers did not move. The commander tilted its head, a small mechanical gesture of curiosity. In human culture, J1 said, walking slowly across the stage, color is not just for sight. It is a language. Long ago, on our oldest buildings, we used colors to speak. This art is called dancing. He stopped near Hannah. Blue, he said, looking at her. It represents the east, the wood, the beginning of things. It is the color of the morning sky, full of potential. He moved to Minsu. Red, the south, fire. It is life and it is warning. It is the heart's blood. It is strength that can build or burn. Minsu met his eyes, his jaw tight. He walked to Yuna. Yellow, the center, the earth. It is the ground we stand on. It is reason. It is the mind that builds and understands. Yuna gave a tiny, almost invisible nod. The patterns tell a story. J1 continued, his voice gaining a subtle rhythm. They are a code of balance, of the 5 directions, the 5 elements, a map of the universe on a simple beam of wood. They are a promise. He was not looking at the aliens anymore. He was speaking directly to his students, weaving a spell with words they alone would fully understand. The promise is that we are part of something, connected, to the earth, to the sky, to each other. This is not a lesson of acceptance of you. He finally turned his head toward the commander. It is a lesson of connection to us, to what we are. As he spoke the last word, he glanced at Yuna and tapped his own elbow twice. Danger. Now, Yuna's hand, hidden in the sleeve of her uniform, pressed a tiny, makeshift connector. It was a wire from the old scoreboard battery, attached to a small bulb she had taken from the fire alarm panel. At the back of the auditorium, high up on the wall, the red exit sign flickered. Not off and on, but in a pattern. 2 short flashes, 1 long flash, then 2 short again. A simple, repeating pulse. It was the only electric light they had access to, and Yuna had given it a heartbeat. The observers' heads swiveled as one toward the flickering sign. Their data slates hummed. It was an anomaly, an illogical power fluctuation. It did not compute. Hannah saw their distraction. From her pocket, she let a small, folded paper packet fall to the floor. She scuffed it with her shoe. It was a mixture of powdered chalk and a tiny bit of cleaning powder Yuna had identified. It puffed up in a small, faint cloud of blue-white dust, like a ghost of paint. At the same moment, Minsu took a deep breath. He looked at the youngest student in their group, a small girl named Subin, who was shaking. He remembered J1's story of Admiral E of Unity. He remembered the tale of the tiger, waiting for its moment to be fierce. This was not a moment for fierceness of fist, but of voice. He began to sing. It was low, just a few notes at first. A very old folk song. Error rang. The small girl, Subin, heard him. Through her tears, she joined in, her voice thin but clear. Error rang. Then Yuna, her focus broken from the wire in her sleeve, added her voice. Then Hannah. Then another student and another. It was not a song of triumph. It was a song of sorrow, of endurance, of walking a long, difficult road. Their voices wove together, shaky but united, filling the air where the alien translation had been. The auditorium became a place of chaos, but a human chaos. A flickering light, a strange, non-toxic mist, a melody of raw, emotional sound. The observers' data slates flickered with frantic symbols. They tried to analyze the light pattern, the chemical composition of the dust, the acoustic properties of the song. They could find no threat, no weapon, no logical reason for any of it. It was a system error of pure culture. The commander took a step forward, its silver line gleaming. Cease this inefficiency, the translator boomed, but its voice was lost under the rising song. J1 stood still in the center of it all. He looked at the commander, and for the first time he saw not a conqueror, but a confused entity. An entity that could scan a body, but could not read a soul. That could understand a rebellion, but not a lullaby. The lesson was over. He had taught it. The lesson was that humanity could not be filed away. It was a pattern of color, a heartbeat of light, a shared song in the dark. It was inefficient. It was messy. It was alive. The commander raised its wrist. The red light glowed. The soldiers by the door snapped their weapons up. The singing faltered, but the flickering light on the exit sign pulsed on. Two short, one long, a heartbeat in the silence. The final, quiet note of the song hung in the air. J1 lowered his translator. He had given Earth's last lesson, and his students had passed the test. The song ended. The flickering light stopped. The small cloud of dust settled. The silence that came back was heavier than before. The commander stared at Mr. Kim J1. Its blank visor seemed to burn with a cold, silent fury. The red light on its wrist pulsed like an angry heart. The observers had put their data slates away. The demonstration was a failure. The human social node had not produced order. It had produced something else. Something illogical. The robotic voice, when it came, was flat but final. The social node is defective. It has introduced instability. It will be removed for analysis. Two soldiers stepped forward. Their steps echoed on the wooden stage. They did not grab J1 roughly. They took his arms with the same efficient, mechanical grip they had used on the coughing boy and on Mr. Park. J1 did not resist. He let go of the translator device, clattered to the floor. He looked at his students. They were frozen, their faces pale, their eyes wide with a new kind of terror. This was the terror of losing their center, their teacher. Yuna took a step forward, but a sharp look from J1 stopped her. It was a look that said, "No. The lesson continues without me." He allowed the soldiers to turn him around. As they began to walk him off the stage, he stopped for just a second. He turned his head back to his class, to Yuna, Minsu, and Hannah. He did not give a grand speech. He did not try to say everything. He gave them one last instruction, simple and clear, in the language they had all studied together. "Remember the story of Hong Gil-dong," he said, his voice calm and firm. Then he turned and walked with the soldiers. He did not look back. The students watched him go. The side door of the auditorium opened. He passed through it. The door closed behind him with a soft, final click. He was gone. For a long minute, no one on the stage moved. The commander observed them. He saw a group of leaderless humans. He saw what looked like defeat. The social node was excised. Order would now return. Turned and left with the observers. The remaining soldiers gestured for the students to line up. The routine was reasserting itself. They were marched back to the gymnasium. The energy barrier hummed. They sat on their blankets in their usual spot. The silence in their little group was complete. Minsu sat with his head bowed, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles were white. Hannah wrapped her arms around her knees, her eyes empty. Yuna stared at the wall, her mind a blank, roaring static. J1 was gone. The man who had turned chemistry into strategy, history into a map, and a folk tale into a survival guide. The man who had shouted a story about an admiral to save a reckless boy. The man who had turned color and song into a quiet rebellion. He was taken. The aliens had won. They had removed the problem. Night fell in the gym. The lights dimmed. The soldiers stood by the door, unchanged. Yuna finally moved. She blinked. She looked at Minsu, then at Hannah. She saw the despair on their faces. It mirrored her own. But then she heard J1's last words in her head. Remember the story of Hong Gil-dong. It was a story from their old literature lessons. Hong Gil-dong, the brilliant, illegitimate son of a nobleman. He was an outsider. The system rejected him. So he used his brilliant mind. He became a trickster, clever rebel. He outsmarted the powerful not with strength, but with wit. He fought for the weak and the forgotten. A spark flickered in Yuna's chest. That was the lesson. He wasn't telling them to mourn. He was telling them who to be now. They were the outsiders. The system had rejected them, so they had to be clever. She nudged Minsu with her foot. He looked up, his eyes red. She didn't speak. She just looked at him, then at the door to the equipment room in the corner. Then she tapped her own temple twice. Think. Minsu stared. Slowly, the fog in his eyes cleared. He remembered the admiral in the narrow strait. He remembered the tiger. He was not a leader, but he could be strength aimed by a clever mind. He gave a small, sharp nod. Yuna looked at Hannah. Hannah was already watching. Her eyes, which had been empty, were now moving. They were tracing the patrol pattern of the guard. They were noting the exact time the light from the high window faded. She was remembering. She was observing. It was what she did. It was her part. She met Yuna's gaze and nodded once. They didn't need a new leader. J1 had prepared them too well for that. He had distributed the lesson. Yuna had the cleverness. Minsu had the strength. Hannah had the sight. And they all had the hidden knowledge, the map of the school, the potential of the cleaning supplies, the wire to the exit sign, the silent hand signals. J1 had not built an army. He had built a single, living mind in 23 parts. And you cannot kill a mind by removing one piece. The next day, when the paste was handed out, Yuna took hers without a word. She ate it. She needed her strength. Minsu did the same. Hannah watched the soldier by the equipment room door. Later, when the gym was quiet, Hannah leaned over. She used her finger to draw on the dusty floor. She drew a simple map. It showed the vent system she had memorized from the ceiling beams. She pointed to a spot. It led to the space above the old woodshop. Yuna studied it. She reached into her sleeve and pulled out a small, twisted piece of wire. She pointed to the janitor's closet next door. Minsu saw the wire. He looked at his own hands. He thought of the wooden door to the equipment room. It was not about breaking it down. It was about opening it quietly. No one said a word. No one looked at each other for too long. They just looked at the map in the dust. Then Hannah smoothed it away with her hand. The teacher was gone. But the classroom was still in session. The curriculum was survival. The final exam was the future. On the other side of the gym, little Subin, the girl who had sung, shifted on her blanket. From under the cuff of her pants, she pulled out a small, broken piece of blue crayon she had hidden days ago. Very slowly, so no one would see, she reached under the leg of the folded-up bleacher beside her. She drew a single, small line of blue. It was the color of the east, the color of the morning sky, the color of beginnings. It was a tiny, defiant act of preservation. A seed, waiting in the dark. Earth's last lesson was over, but the students were just beginning to teach it to themselves.